This is the Dirty Lou Podcast. This week's guest, Mike Dostie of Dostie Jeweler.
Oh man, I've been talking about doing this for a year or two now. I can't believe you're doing it,
But the Dirty Lou name.
Oh, yeah, I said, oh God, I hope you're not doing that podcast called The Dirty Lou. I saw that online somewhere.
Mike, you gotta take it back.
Exactly.
Need to take it back.
It's not ironic. It's accurate.
Why?
What
Why
do you
is it
mean, why?
accurate? I don't believe it's accurate at all.
I just went to the botanical gardens for the first time ever.
Yeah.
And we're driving through every little quaint little coastal town on the way there. And the streetscaping, the hardscaping, the landscaping, like everything is flawless. You see a curb and it looks like it was installed yesterday. And you're like, I could park my car. I could eat off that curb.
But do we want that?
Yes.
We do?
Yes.
Okay.
You want a clean, attractive city that people drive through. They're like, wow, this is nice.
But we don't want
I
like
like
the
this.
villages in Florida.
No, that's like Logan's Run, except inverted.
You talked about little quaint towns and cities on the coast where there's money being invested in
That's what it comes down to,
the
isn't it?
infrastructure of the city. Correct. When you think of the Dirty Lou, what do you think of? The connotation.
The connotation.
It's not because it's a filthy looking town.
Well, I mean...
Or do you think that's where it comes from?
Let's go on to social media. I mean, you have people that haven't been to this town since the late 80s, and they're like, Lewiston sucks. That place is terrible. There's hookers on the corner and downtown, and there used to be bars, and they'd be throwing people through windows and all that. I'm like, well, when was the last time you were here? I used to live there in 1989, and I've been in Monmouth ever since. Like, well, shit, man. I mean, come on. I mean, you could say the same thing about the Old Port, but the Old Port has evolved, and now it's like super bougie.
Yeah, super bougie. Like, I don't even recognize it the same way that I remember it when I used to go there.
Dude, we're talking like 15 years ago, and I was talking to somebody who's opening a restaurant down there, and she's like telling me where it is. I'm like, oh, that street sounds familiar. And she's like giving me landmarks that are businesses that were not there at all.
At all.
I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Is Grace still open? Do you know if Grace is still open?
They
That was one of those
closed.
places I wanted to go to, and I never got to. The church restaurant, yes.
Yeah, I liked it. It was a little too bougie even for me.
Was it?
But
Wow,
it
right up
definitely-
your alley, and you weren't crazy about it, huh?
No, they closed some time ago, and the place was for sale. I haven't heard
Yeah,
anything
I think I
since.
knew that.
Yeah.
I think I knew that. Okay, so getting back to the Dirty Lou. You think it comes from, I think it comes from reputation.
Well,
But I don't
yes.
know what that reputation is. I guess if you want to talk about it, it's that block of space, the downtown.
Also referred to as the tree streets.
No,
Okay.
I don't think of the tree streets when I think of the Dirty Lou. I really don't.
Okay.
But that's my take.
Yeah, I would say.
I think of the Dirty Lou as when it used to be head shops only, pawn shops only, members clubs only. That kind of that. It was much more lively for a period of time, but it wasn't necessarily like the kind of life style that, say, like a business like yourself would like to see growing in the downtown area,
Yeah.
like we've seen in the last, say, 10 years, 10 or 15.
Yeah, but we're not
not
there,
seeing
though.
it.
We're still not there. I mean, you use a name like the Dirty Lou, and you use it ironically, and it's not ironic because it'd be like if I called you Tiny, like you're not big enough to have a nickname Tiny.
Yeah, I gotcha.
It's not.
Sure.
It doesn't work.
We should be
It's not
calling like
ironic.
Duke Pee-wee, right?
Yeah,
Because
that's
it's
a
the
little
opposite
more
of what it
accurate.
is.
Exactly. I mean, it's just if our primary drag, if our downtown business district was, we'll call it somewhat bougie. I think that's going to be the word of the day.
Okay.
But if
Go
it
with
was
it.
full, let's say that at least it was full. You don't have any empty storefronts. Most of the lawyers move to kind of peripheral streets or upper levels, so you have public-facing businesses on the street. I think at that point, and couple that with some of the green space, if they can really, Public Works can continue to make improvements there. If you have a city that, if you had a family of, 2 parents and 3 kids, and they age from 2.5 all the way up to 6, you're like, you know what, it doesn't matter what time of day or what time of evening, that family's going to be comfortable coming downtown and going to a restaurant. like that's when you can start adopting, a kind of a gritty, edgy kind of nickname because it's not reflective of what's there. But what we have right now, we're not to that point.
We're not.
And
I agree. We're not there.
it's looked at as it's too accurate. I mean, it's not dissimilar enough
So
from
you
what
think
you
it's
just
going to
described.
inhibit? You think it's going to slow down the process of these new businesses or businesses wanting to
Well, I don't think it would help.
move
And
downtown, move down onto what do we have for streets that we can deal with on the downtown area where businesses can come in? You've got Lisbon Street,
we've got Lisbon Street.
and then
We've got Lisbon Street.
right,
So, I mean, the downtown business district, it really extends from like Middle Street down to the water, from Main Street
Yeah,
down
right.
to Adams Avenue.
Right.
I mean, you'd have to do a little bit of carving around the Kennedy Park area to kind of exclude the neighborhoods if you're looking for kind of exclusively business district. But that's, when I say downtown, I think a business district. When I grew up off the coast of Brunswick, and so if I said to you, like, I'm going downtown,
Yeah.
you know that I'm going to the main strip right on there, Main Street with an E.
yeah.
Right where that mall is, right the grassy area. I'm not going to McKean Street.
No,
I'm not going to the
you're
neighborhood.
right. You're right. Absolutely.
Lewiston's like the
Same
only
with Hollowell
municipality-
when I'm right near the river. Yeah. Gardner, same area, same kind of thing, right in that downtown.
You're not going to a neighborhood, and yet Lewiston is like the only municipality that I've ever seen that there's an entire neighborhood that has adopted the term downtown as well. And that's obnoxious when, I mean, we went through this, I think 2 summers ago when there was a lot of violence around Kennedy Park, and they were saying, oh, shooting downtown, fight downtown. And, we had a conversation with the editor of the paper, and we said, if you just say shooting downtown, that sounds like it was right outside of Dostie Jewelers or right in front of Da Vinci's Eatery.
Yeah.
But really, you're talking about a completely different sector of the population and the demographics. But it's just it's so ingrained at this point. There's no way to really unring that bell, so to speak.
Is it because we have businesses that will start up in areas, but we don't have a combination of businesses pairing side to side or creating niches or neighborhoods?
I think it's because the neighborhood has taken that on as its personality. It's a badge they wear. We're downtown. I live downtown. I mean, if I'm saying I live downtown in Brunswick, like the example, you know exactly where I live.
Yeah, true.
And if I'm saying
Right.
I live downtown Portland, you know I'm on the peninsula. Well, at this point, Christ, the whole thing is downtown. But you're in that urban setting versus you're in a neighborhood. So that's a tough one.
It is a tough one. But how can you have like lawyers' offices move off of the first floor? How can you ask them to, and then as a city, what businesses are you moving into those spots? It's something you've been looking at for a while, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Well, I
And
mean,
how can it grow? Who looks at that? Is it city council? Is it
I think
is
it
it
comes
those?
down to.
I think it's always about who wants to influence the city,
Well,
correct, and work with it.
I think there's 2 different approaches. There's the top-down approach, which is the city council and city administration. They say, well, we want a thriving economic center, and we want to influence the lawyers and the non-public facing businesses to be in the peripheral streets or on the second levels, and we want public-facing businesses. That almost always fails because municipalities are not geared for small business or small investment. They're looking at incentivizing big development, major development. I mean, we look at the Hartley block on Lisbon Street as a good example.
Yeah.
Pineland Lumber, I can't remember, Saxon Partners. Huge.
What happened at Pineland Lumber? I missed that.
Getting torn to the ground.
Is it?
Well, they're going to build, I think, 247 market rate units in 2 buildings. They're
Now-
like 2 cans of sardines.
I had read that the infrastructure in the neighborhood doesn't really, it's not set up for. Yeah, so what's the story behind that?
Understatement. Actually, for that conversation, you really want to get Josh Nagin on
Okay.
here because he is the king of Sunnyside. Like, that is his neighborhood. That's his jam.
Yeah, I used
But
to live in that neighborhood.
It's the tough thing is it's because of the zoning. So you have, and I don't know exactly, so I'm some of this it might not be 100% accurate,
Okay.
but you've got like a neighborhood where you can't develop, and
Right.
it's integrated into an industrial area that is all development. So Josh is telling me an example. He's like, I've got what looks like a junkyard directly across the street from a single family home.
Yeah.
And, so they
have zoned that area as industrial park area code where you can. It's always been warehouse friendly.
Oh, yeah. Well, and to
Always.
get an exception is the easiest thing in the world. I mean, there was just talk about a project that fell through that was right on the verge or right on the line of being between two zones, and they looked at changing the zoning for it. Like, it seems like any major development that happens, they're like, well, let's change the zoning so that can happen. But because
They've been very, very friendly to the cannabis industry in taking up a lot of those warehouse spaces that were either dilapidated or older. But the thing is, that doesn't change the cosmetic end of it. It doesn't do anything to build the neighborhood aspect of it or businesses that would pair with that. Is that corner store that was down on Spring Street, is that still open, or is that's boarded up?
It's boarded up. It's been boarded up for over a decade.
Yeah, but I mean, the zoning in, I think it's Conservation B over there, like if you wanted to open like a bike shop on your first floor and live above, couldn't do that. Coffee shop, can't do it. Bar, can't do it. Like, it's just not zoned for that. It's a neighborhood.
So is it
So it's
zoning?
not mixed zoning.
Oh, go ahead.
No, sorry.
Well, to come back to your question earlier, or your observation about how the infrastructure, the roadways are so garbage out there, and that's because they've got tractor trailer trucks that are going through. Oh, it's neighborhood on this side of the road, but it's industrial park on this side of the road, or whatever it may be. So I mean, there's a lot of wear and tear on the roads out there, and with anything, you don't maintain
Riverside Drive is one of those that cuts around and goes near the cemetery over there.
Yeah.
And that road is always a disaster, always in horrible shape, rough shape.
Yeah.
But I believe there's a propane.
Yeah, and a cab company is
Yeah,
back there.
right. A moving company as well.
Warehouses, moving company. There's there's a pizza dough company back there too.
it. Yeah.
Does
get on board with
CMMC own a lot of
CMMC
property there
has-
as well?
Yeah, they have a
Or
warehouse.
what is it that
there.
they're using it for? Has it been projects or they're just business building acquisitions?
They could be land banking. I mean, they've got a huge parking needs, and it's a lot less expensive to spread out than spread up. You don't have to build major parking structures, but I really couldn't say. I'm not as versed in that as well.
So what you're telling me, what I'm
Change
hearing.
the Dirty Lou name.
Oh, well,
It's
no.
terrible.
We'll get
We
back to
hate
that
it.
later. We'll get
That's
back to
what we
that later.
started with. Come on, you're killing me.
But it's not business friendly.
Sounds like-
Lewiston, it's small business. Would you say it's friendly or not? Because of these hardships, because of zoning, because of even grants. Like, wasn't there something that just came up recently, if I'm not mistaken? Is it a $3 million or $30 million?
$30 million.
$30 million grant
Yes. I mean, but that
for
is
gentrification of the downtown? Is that what it is, or?
No. So gentrification implies that there's improvements that elevate your property taxes, your valuations, your rents, and it pushes people out. With that development, the choice neighborhood development, that is intended to kind of rebuild some of the housing structure, housing infrastructure that is just old and dilapidated. I mean, for lack of a better term. I mean, there's much more accurate terms. But,
Sure.
So that one is not, I mean, it looks, if you were to just at a glance be like, whoa, major gentrification, but really that's not the intention at all, and that's not what the anticipated result will be, because they want people to be owner-occupied. It's just that our housing stock was built in the 50s and before. And so you've got a lot of lead paint in those neighborhoods. You've got neighborhoods that were built on multifamily units that the entire family lived in them. But what happens when those families kind of retire and they move out and an anonymous developer moves in? Kind of the non-existent landlord. Victims, really that's what that neighborhood's the victim of. So the choice neighborhood thing is looking to address some of those major issues.
It is looking to address those issues.
Yes. So actually coming back to the dirty little word that you used and the question that you asked
We're going to call it the Not So
it?
Dirty Lou podcast.
No, the
Okay,
word.
the other word.
Gentrification. So,
but it is actually what it is.
Well, not that. So
Okay.
we're going to skip backwards.
Sure.
So choice neighborhood, not gentrification. You asked really what's going to take to rebuild the economic center of the city.
There have to be incentives.
It's got to be a little bit of gentrification. I mean, it's not a dirty word. Everyone sees what happened to Portland as gentrification without question. But that's an extreme. That's gentrification, like as extreme as you could take it. But in small doses, it's what's necessary. I mean, that's actually how you build wealth with some of the smaller developers is their buildings actually appreciate in value rather than just deteriorate. And therefore, they have more access to equity that they can reinvest. I mean, you want that. You want small infill development, and you need gentrification to justify it. Otherwise, I'm going to buy this crappy old building in the middle of a business district.
And then I can't afford to fix it up.
And I can't fix it. And why
Or you're
would
only
I?
fixing it at a minimal enough to make it where you can turn it over and
You're
start
just
to.
maintaining it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do have a lot of neighborhoods like that.
Yeah, not to start, fights that I can't win, but how much of this is the city council, just making bad decisions?
I wouldn't put
I don't
it
know
on
if I could put it on them
city
either,
council.
from my experience.
Okay.
It comes down to, I think there are great examples nationally that were called into attention from the pandemic. So bear with me here, but
Yeah.
big parallel. You have these major corporations that have these massive office spaces, and their corporate structure is the way that it is. And then all of a sudden the pandemic kind of rolls through and says, well, you can't have everybody in your crazy office. So they suddenly had to change and adapt, which they never had to do before, because this is the way that business is done. This is the way it works. So you didn't have to get creative in your thinking on how are we going to do additional cost savings because profits are down across the board. Like it was a much more kind of structured approach. We have to downsize. We're going to cut out this department and we're going to split it up and sell it off. Whereas this was like, well, there's no one to sell anything off to. So they had to really think outside the box as to how they were going to survive. City of Lewiston hasn't had that come to Jesus moment, or is going through it, but at a much slower pace. So if we look at how the city of Lewiston approached development, and we were to go back 25 years, it would be about an industrial park. That's the priority. Well, this industrial park thing works. If we go back to the 80s, it would be a mall. We need a mall. This new shiny thing
Our
called
little
a mall.
gasoline alley, Lisbon Street or Center Street in Auburn. Yep.
So now there is kind of a national movement back towards having traditional downtowns. But the city, I mean, it's like a dinosaur. It takes a very long time for it to move, and when it does, it starts moving very slow. Because you're asking people that are in departments to do things in ways that they never have before, which equates to more work or more difficult work or work that requires more training.
It's going to be a lot slower progress because it's all very new.
And change is threatening
Yeah. Well, and then there's that too.
to people.
So about 10 years ago, I want to say when we had cap developments down there downtown, and I was down in the area a
good
lot
old
more. So I was
days.
starting, yes, the good old days. But I bring that up because I hadn't spent that much time downtown to speak of. But there weren't very many places outside of going to like a members only a bar.
Yeah.
I remember doing that because, hey, it was cool. What else are you going to do on Lisbon Street? So before that period of time, there wasn't much to bring me downtown, to bring me into that location. So it's still very relatively new in finding its identity, is it not?
Yeah. Well, I mean, at that same time, though, you did have a catalyst for the more affluent individuals. So you had Eric Agron that opened Fuel Restaurant, which
Right.
was just opened a lot of doors for possibilities, but catered to a very affluent market. So, for what you're describing,
Yeah, it wasn't all
is there
inclusive.
something for me? I don't know what they would take to be that catalyst, but that didn't Fuel Restaurant didn't come from city council making a decision, we're going to go after small development. It didn't come from city staff saying we're gonna incentivize this property. Mm-hmm. It came from somebody that actually saw potential and vision and took a chance. And then it just changed everything. So now everything is kind of evolving, and the importance on small infill development is being understood. Say, well, all right, well, when we talk about putting 2,500 people in the mill in an office space, that's fantastic. It brings a lot of people to the area, but when a single restaurant can single-handedly change the face of the business district.
It did.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty powerful stuff. So you can't just say, well, that's not important anymore.
He also invested on Lisbon Street because it was the right time financially too. It's not like the property was high valued.
No, it was definitely not.
It was, so he could take that, just the purchase. I think he purchased the building, if I'm not mistaken.
Three technically, yeah.
He did where Marche used to be and where Medco is now, right? He had bought that building as well.
Yeah.
I do remember Paul and Kate with Fishbones also buying where Mother India is right now.
Yeah, that was a little bit before then too.
A little bit before. So there was that time, and so we were starting to see, even LA Magazine had a presence down there for a little bit, and now Anchor and some other businesses, but it does come from people who are willing to take a chance on a small business level.
Yeah.
And that's why I was wondering if the city is partnering enough or able enough to entice more small business owners to come to the downtown area.
So
deal with, and I bring it up to you because I know for a fact you deal with the city quite a bit.
Just this morning.
Just this morning. And you've always done that though too. I mean, when I was with Captive and we were doing that, the only reason why the art walk happened was for you and Gray Ling, but you were a catalyst in the connections with the LA Arts and with the city.
Well,
and there were other people who were involved in that process too, though, right?
So yes and
Am
no.
I right or wrong?
We found out what the rules were. So when we first said to the city, like, hey, we're going to have an art walk, they're like, okay, you're going to need these permits and this. And we're like, all right, so what are the rules about these permits? What if people are in private property? We found out what all the rules and regulations were so that we could work around them. I mean, and the same thing when it came to, whether or not you can serve wine or beer during an art walk.
Yeah, right.
Reaching out to the state liquor inspector, find out exactly what the rules are so that you're not breaking them, and then find a way that you can safely navigate them. I mean, and that's how I started getting involved with the city and the different departments is having these conversations like, hey, I want to do this freaking cool project. So who's gonna stop me? Like, that guy's gonna stop me. All right, I'm gonna go talk to that guy. I'm gonna find out how he's gonna stop me and why, so that I can work around that, so that I can navigate through that. And then it just kind of extended into, well, a lifetime of pain for me.
Tell me more about that pain.
No. We'll save that for another story.
About 3 weeks ago, I saw you walking around downtown in a very similar shirt.
Oh, yeah, because I got out of
talking
work.
to a couple. No, it was in the morning.
Oh, okay, well, I was going to work.
Right. And you were, there were a couple other businessmen who you were talking with.
Oh,
and
yes.
to. You remember that?
Yeah, vaguely.
Vaguely.
Yes.
So you were looking at some buildings or maybe just a layout, or what was that?
So this is actually kind of exciting. This is the type of thing that I want to see, and I want to see happen more frequently sooner. Is there's a group of 3 young investors, young as in under the age of 50, and they bought 3 big buildings. Actually, where Deluxe currently is, or where Fisk used to be. If you're in Forge Market and you walk towards Ash Street, all 3 of the buildings that you walk in front of, they're all interconnected. But these guys bought all 3 of them, and they wanted to kind of get a feel for the town, get that kind of inside track. So they called me.
Well, they did.
Well, they through a friend of a friend of a friend.
Inside track meaning.
Well, just to get a feel. I mean, they're not familiar at all with this area. So, what is the downtown? What's the nightlife like?
Yeah.
What type of events do you have? It was actually a very quick conversation, I hate to say. But
A little too quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but it was accurate. So what's exciting about these guys is they're young and they're very hungry. They bought these buildings not knowing what they were going to do with them, because I heard that their plans were on the upper floors. They wanted to do some market rate housing, which I love. We are in so desperate need for. And they wanted to reopen the first floor to commercial space, public-facing commercial space. And that's exactly what we need. We need more market rate housing.
Oh, we do.
And we need activated commercial storefronts. So I asked them, I said, so what's the bigger asset? Do you see the value in these buildings in the housing, or do you see it in the commercial space? And they kind of like shrugged, like,
Not quite sure.
And I said, so, yeah, not just kind of like, didn't really have an answer. I said, so why'd you buy these buildings? Like, because they're cheap. And I was like, all right. I like, okay, we're getting someplace. And since they're, I think they're just finished closing on them now, they know what they want. They want a brewery or a tap room or something like that in those spaces. They've been putting offers out to some of their contacts, because these guys have a lot of connections in the Portland market.
Sure.
And, we had Mass Landing Brewing that came up, and it was because, well, they gave us an offer that we couldn't not at least look at.
Right.
And now they're talking to a couple of different other breweries about coming in, and they're looking at it as, if we can get somebody in here, it's going to cost us a lot of money. We bought these buildings, and now we're going to have to shell out a lot for building out the spaces.
Next phase.
Yeah.
But they're also looking at it as, but if we can get somebody in here, even if it's at below what our investment warrants, it activates this building. It makes the building more attractive. It allows us to open up other avenues for more development.
Sure.
So I'm excited about that, because it's expensive to renovate a building. I mean, you look at
That Subway, or it's not called Subway building, but Subway was on the first floor.
Yeah,
But
the
that
McGillicuddy
building,
building.
where Saunders also in the basement now too. I
Yeah.
remember looking at that in its raw form with Tom Ardia at one time. Very, very. And there was also talk about needing to put an elevator on the backside of the building if you were going to do anything on the third or fourth floor, or the necessity for it.
Yeah.
That's not the kind of investment you can expect from local people typically.
So, I mean,
Outside of if
what
you're
is an
Schott or
elevator like?
Gendron or throwing in one of those last names.
Be like, oh, we're gonna have to put $300,000 into the build out for the first floor, and then let's throw another $700,000 in for an elevator. No big deal,
And that's just not something you're going to see from local people. So
Really, you can?
I don't think so. Not too
$1
often.
million on a building? No.
Dude, tough enough here. I don't know what you're talking about.
Do you know that couple that moved up from Brooklyn? I've been trying to think of their name. They bought, I forget which building, but they've been trying to fix it up themselves. It's Kevin and
Diana.
yeah.
Don't ask me to try and pronounce her last name.
No, no wonder I couldn't remember. But they bought a building, and then they've slowly tried to fix it up. And I haven't seen it in a year or so, but I'd gone up to their apartment and seen what they had done there. But that's the kind of challenge that, is an issue. I mean, they couldn't just drop a couple $100,000 to fix the building up.
Well, they did the same thing that Gabby Russell, that owns where the Captive Elements was.
Anchor is now, I believe.
LA
Advertising.
Acupuncture just moved in.
Oh,
They
did
just
they?
opened up. So they went through the Historic Preservation Board and Commission. They got historic tax credits. They also worked with the city for some of their CBDG use funding. I mean, Kevin and Diana were, I think, looked at as exactly what we want. Is we have these young people, they're boomerangs, or he was a boomerang, like grew up here, went off, now he's back investing. But unfortunately, it just looked like they took as much as they could. They fixed up their building as much as they could, and then they just kind of left. Like, this was not the community that was for them. And I feel used.
You don't think
How come you feel
that
used
maybe
up?
it was just too hard for them to kind of keep it up financially, or to come up with money to finish? Or
Oh, no,
I mean,
it's done.
I don't know them.
It's done. It's
Okay,
rented.
it's total-
Even the commercial space is
they
rented.
were just like, we don't want to be in the dirty loo.
Exactly. Dirty little.
Oh, that's now I feel partly responsible. Dostie Jewelery opened up when? What year would that have been? Are we talking
October of 1947.
I was going to guess the 40s.
Soft,
47.
easy 47. 19.
What jewelry? What was jewelry like back then?
Lots of pearls.
So
Same location since?
in 47, my grandfather opened a shop right behind where the police station is now. And in 1962 to 1964 is when he moved to the corner where we are now. And then in 1972 is when he took over the entirety of the first floor of that building. Because that building used to be 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 Lisbon Street, and now it's just 4 Lisbon Street. Because it's all one space when you walk in.
Had
But
it
used
been
to-
subdivided?
Oh, yeah.
It was. Oh, it
We
was
have
subdivided quite a bit.
3 different basements. There's like 4 different
Yeah, your
floor
basements. I remember
levels.
going in there and seeing that.
Yeah, creepy,
Yeah,
huh?
that was weird. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was
we
all
kept
over.
it that way.
You liked. You were
It's part of
living
the
on the
charm.
second floor for a while. Are you still?
I was living on the second floor of that building. I was living on the 3rd floor of the adjacent building where Joe Bornstein's office is.
Yeah.
And not anymore. No, living in New Auburn.
New Auburn.
Newish Auburn. I think they ought to rename that.
It's not so new anymore. No.
Like newer.
Or will it? Or will it undergo a little bit of a change here?
So they got a park. They tore down a bunch of buildings and they got a park. I mean, that doesn't make it new again. I mean, the New Auburn Village is huge. So it's newish Auburn.
So I do like it because there's a strong residential part in New Auburn, but then you've got that base area that hasn't really been pushed.
Like the inner city of New Auburn.
Sure.
The
Yeah, I
main
guess.
streets of New Auburn, like when you're down in like First Street.
Is that where the
2nd Street.
diner, like Raleigh's Diner, is?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
the center of New Auburn Village.
Okay.
I think if they had their way, they would actually just pull away and be like, you know what? We're not part of Auburn anymore. We're New Auburn. Mm-hmm. Kind of like New Portland.
Auburn doesn't have a downtown to speak of. Not a designated, not a centered area. Like I was talking to somebody once before, and they said, I think I'd rather be Auburn because I've got Center Street, I've got New Auburn, and I've got where like Gritty's is. All these different, and to me, that being so spread out as opposed to this closeness, this proximity, and this intimacy that we have here in downtown Lewiston.
Yeah.
I think I'd prefer that any old time.
Oh, I do too. I mean, technically speaking, Auburn does have a downtown area.
Technically?
It's a designation. I think it goes all the way up to the Auburn Public Library and all the way down to the waterfront. And I don't know how far it extends, if it goes all the way to Ruper's but they have a large geographic
Is
area.
that their business district? Is that what they term their downtown?
I think it's just technically downtown. And I don't know if the different designations or names have any relevance to specific funding available or anything like that. But they do have a downtown. But to your point, it's not what you'd envision. It's
No.
kind of like when I go to
It definitely
downtown
lacks
Durham.
cohesiveness, you know.
Yes, well, they've got more of a downtown in newish Auburn than they do in down by Gritty's. They've got like a block, a city block, that's downtown.
You don't, your business is not predicated on how much foot traffic is coming through.
No, we'd be out of business a long time ago. No, I mean, for a long time, and I would say even to a certain extent now, downtown Lewiston, our business district, was a destination downtown versus a downtown that you would actually just go. Like, if I'm going to the Old Port, I might have a destination in mind, but I'm just going to go. And if,
Yeah, right,
I'm going to
right.
have lunch here, I'm going to stop in, oh, that's a cute sweater. Okay. I might
Yeah,
say-
there's
I
so
might
many
actually say
different
that.
things you can walk, right. Yeah. There's so many different areas that you can walk through or walk around without ever really planning on it.
Right.
That's what you're talking about.
Whereas here, you're coming downtown either because it's a primary artery for vehicle traffic, or you're going to Rainbow Bikes because you have a bike issue, or you're coming to Dostie Jewelers because you have a jewelry issue. But you're not like, hey, let's go hang out downtown and oh, look at this, let's go buy a bike. I mean, you don't have that type of retail.
Yeah, I can see that.
So it's a little different. It's a little
That
different.
park area that's near Argo and near the vault, I forgot, Smart? Is that called Smart Payne Park? Or is
That's,
that right here?
Dufresne.
Dufresne, it's Dufresne.
Yeah.
there could be, and there are activities and events that do occur there, or music, or different from time to time, but
Yep.
not often enough, not with regularity.
No,
Like opening it up where we're going there on a Friday or a Saturday night to our downtown.
Well, they had a concert series there a couple of years ago. I don't know if they still are doing that.
Yeah, LA
Post-pandemic, if
Arts.
there's any plans.
Yeah, LA Arts was. I mean, they've done a couple of different things. They did a art in the park kind of series that I think that has kind of faded away. Now they've got the art walks, but they've been all virtual. For the past year, and they're looking at kind of firing those back up. But when they do the art walks, it's very different from when Carrie and Grayling and I started the art walks, because the focus was entirely on the visual art and was entirely on, like, all right, we've got, impromptu galleries. And
Yep.
if you're participating in the art walk, you are literally walking into a place to look at art. Whereas LA Arts has taken a very different approach where the focus seems to be much more weighted towards their performances. And
Right.
as a participating venue, that's been very difficult for us, because we're saying, like, well, we want people to come in our door. We want people to see the artists that we're featuring, and you're competing with that
Yeah.
by telling people, come see our performance. And I think the impression that I have now is that message was not just from, or that sentiment was not just one that I had, that artists feel that as well, because now the resource for artists to participate in the art walk is much, much, much smaller, much more limited.
I think the focus at the time was on the arts and the spaces where you could show arts as well. I want to say there was even a resistance on their part back then for performance, if I'm not mistaken. Like they were like, well, we don't know if we can give you a permit for that. Really. And so it shifted, though. It shifted. And I think I like the balance. I think that it's a good idea if they have this balance that they can find between the two. But it's about promoting the businesses who are downtown, who are participating, who are a part of the community.
Well,
That's what we're talking about, community, isn't it?
It's a balance, though. I mean, you don't have an art walk just so that you can get people into Dostie Jewelers. It's a balance. You want to attract them into the space. It's an impromptu gallery, so it's unique. It's dynamic in terms of gallery space. But you also want the art to be appreciated. I mean, because if the art isn't appreciated, there's no art walk. Without the artist, there's no art walk. And that's the issue that I have with a lot of the performances. Your focus isn't on the artists. You're moving away from the model that actually gives you the basis that you're building off of.
Sounds like if they could come to an agreement where it just wasn't happening on the same day and it had its own separate, the performances could be, third Friday of every month, then it would actually benefit. We'd have a lot more traffic, more things going on, and there wouldn't be the competition. So they just don't want to work with it?
About.
Okay.
It's been talked about. Actually, even Carrie, when we were facilitating the entire thing, we said to organizations that approached us and said we want to schedule this performance or whatnot. We encourage them to just start it at 8, so that it wouldn't compete. So
Yeah.
people can come to the art walk and then they
Then
can
you
migrate
keep
in
the party
towards-
going longer.
Exactly,
Yeah.
but not a lot of appetite for that. I mean, it's difficult to.
We did a
create
couple
market.
performances. We did a couple musical performances at our place.
You did?
Yeah.
Did you sing?
No, I didn't.
You gonna sing for us now?
No, I'm not going to sing for you now.
But you
No,
get
one
that-
of
you
my
get that
favorites
deep,
was
You get that deep baritone thing going on.
I've been said
do
I'm
I
a
get
poor
a-
man's Barry White is
Do I
what I
need
was
to
told once.
Get a little closer. I can sound like Carrie.
You sound good like that.
It's a bedtime voice.
It is.
And there's that.
Yeah, you kind of just totally killed that, didn't
Are you
you?
blushing?
A little bit. He knows how to get me.
Oh yeah.
So if you were to have an influence to a greater degree for what occurs and what's happening with the downtown, and that's not to say that you don't already, because I think you've been a business owner here for quite some time who has always pushed to see a better community, a better environment.
Yeah.
What for the people who live here, for the people who are taking part and could help or could be motivated to take part in their community, in their downtown, and to make a difference, what would you suggest? What are some of the things that from the everyday person, not just those of us who maybe notice it, and it's not to say they don't notice it, it's to say, what do I do?
It's a tough thing. I mean, you have to pay attention, and
Because
you
I'm
have to
sometimes lost on
you have
that.
to pay attention and find out when things are taking place and attend.
Attend.
I mean, that's what it comes down to. I mean, if, let's say, for example, the art walk, once, let's say they were all live, and the art walk brought in 2,000 people once a month, every single month. I mean, that's an indication that there's potential for growth. You could spin off into a concert series. You know that the interest is there. But if, the population says, well, I'm not interested in the art walk, so I'm not going to go, and the average attendance is 120 people over the course of, an evening, there isn't a single person that's going to say, I can't wait to start the next one of these.
Yeah. There's no reward there.
It's a tough thing. There's a lot of leaps of faith. I mean, these 3 developers that I talked about that bought next to Forage, I mean, for them, it was a leap of faith, but they're also of a means where they could say, it's cheap enough. Like, it's not going to kill them. Whereas investment for, like, one of us is...
Oh, sure.
It's
Yeah,
like
it's a make or break.
Life-changing.
Yeah,
like,
right.
I'm either going to survive this and possibly thrive, or I'm going to be living in that dumpster. Maybe not that dumpster, a different dumpster.
Yeah, I do like that they did put some art, some graffiti on the wall here next to the dumpster.
They're going to have a tough time with that. They're going to have a
With
real
graffiti?
tough time with the art that's behind this building, yeah.
What do you mean they're going to have a hard time with it?
So one thing that we
Did they get a
learned-
permit?
I'd be shocked and appalled.
I wonder if that's what we could do.
Well, what has complicated public art is that the city of Lewiston is, I think in 2018, established a historic district. So everyone is familiar with a historic listed building, like the old First National Bank where Joe Bornstein is. That is a historic listed building. Well, a district is, and I hope that anybody listening from the Historic Preservation Review Board will forgive me for oversimplifying, but it's a indication that there's a number of buildings that have similar construction from the same era that are reflective of that time period. They don't necessarily all meet the thresholds that, say, the First National Bank building does, but they're still historically relevant. For example, and that could be either through their style of their construction or some of the use. So it could have
there are
been,
different types of qualifications for a build, or not qualifications, but
yeah, that kind
there are,
of
I
gets you into
suppose,
that.
right? Yeah.
So there's enough of these buildings in such close proximity to one another that they were able to create a historic district. And that means that you might have, just for conversation's sake, if you had a quarter-mile stretch of road, spattered throughout that, you have a couple of buildings that would be listed buildings. But the buildings in between the listed buildings were also still historic. They just didn't have as much significance as those listed buildings. So now that is an entire district. And you can have buildings like this one that is right next door here at 183 Lisbon Street, Main Street, and the building on the corner, what we're talking about.
Yeah, right.
What's the address there?
195 to, I know it goes 190, maybe 201.
Yeah,
perhaps.
so 195 to 201 is a contributing structure. So it's not historic on its own, but it contributes to the district.
Gotcha.
And therefore, there are major restrictions around it.
Falls under some rules.
So any exterior alteration, which paint on the exterior is an alteration, needs to get approval from the Historic Preservation Review Board. So this isn't even new policy that the city is developing now. This is policy that's been existing since the development of this district, which was 2018.
Which isn't too long ago, though.
Not too long ago.
With that kind of loophole, or not kind of loophole.
It's kind of the opposite of
It is a
loophole.
loophole. It is the opposite. It makes it more difficult.
Oh yeah. I mean, you want
And
to
there's
change.
no way of, because it's a part of the district, there's no way of sidestepping that.
No way of getting around it. You have to go before the Historic Preservation Review Board. You have to submit your proposal.
And the idea of making it a historic district, creating that, the incentive to do that, or was there an incentive on
So
the city level?
there is an incentive because using that same building example, 195 to 201, let's say, for example,
Would that make you open for
they said
grants?
you'd be able to qualify for federal funding for things. Like, let's say that they wanted to change all of their windows. These windows are old, they're terrible, we need to update them. They could actually apply for historic tax credits and other grants to help offset those costs because they're now in a historic district and they're a contributing structure. Whereas if that district didn't exist, they'd be like, well, you don't qualify for anything. Why are you coming to us? Put your own damn windows in.
Who handles that? So you've got to do that on you said federal grants.
Though there are federal grants available, I think there's
Is it
state.
something you can go through the city if you're wanting to? It's funny you say that because I was talking with the building manager over there when I moved into, for people who need to kind of know, the old Zimmy's building, or at least on that corner, it's the Zimmy's. And he and I were looking at the space, and I'm like, wow, this is kind of cool. Like, there was this time when this was sort of like the place, or one of the places.
Yeah.
But the outside of it, there are 3 lights and this nice facade of really, really tiny area that it needs improvements, entirely needs improvements, because the other 3 locations just look like ass.
Yeah.
If I can say that, which I did. But in order to fix it up, it would need to go through grants at this point, or it'd need to go through that process.
Well, no matter what, if he wants to go for grants or not, because it's now a contributing structure, he's going to have to get sign off from the Historic Preservation Review Board. Even if he says, hey, I want to put up I want to replace the window. Use that example again. I want to replace the window with something that's updated, that's better insulation. Because the window is connected to the exterior of the building, it's an exterior alteration, he has to go and get a certificate of appropriateness from the Historic Preservation Review Board.
Of appropriateness.
I know, I thought it was weird too.
Yeah.
I was like, I feel like I'm in 3rd grade asking if this is a real word. But yeah, so I mean, it's got its advantages, but as we found out, it's got some severe disadvantages.
It really
too.
slows down the process too, doesn't it?
It can very much.
I'm just going to keep. Yeah. Well, I suppose one of the things that I was hoping for from Lewiston, from the Dirty Lou, is to see the people take it back.
The dirty.
To let it be small business owners. And so when you're talking about like this group coming up from Portland, and I'm not naive to think that there's not a lot of local large money willing to make these investments. But am I right on that? You sort of,
Well, I mean,
it's not a mall.
I think it
It's
comes
not,
back to, early discussions on forming the Downtown Lewiston Association, which is a business organization. We're like a micro geographic chamber of commerce, so to speak. And initially we said, well, we've got great ideas and we've got some great plans to really market Lewiston to outside of this community. Like, we need to get people to actually come here.
Oh, sure.
Because that shithead that hasn't been here since 1989, like, he needs to see that it's very different than it was in 1989 when he was last here.
Yep.
And we very, very quickly realized that we need to shift focus. If we want to attract people from outside of the area, we need to reintroduce to people that actually live here. Because if I'm going to spend
But their only reintroduction is like the Balloon Festival.
well, and
Are we selling ourselves a little short with maybe some of the things that we put on?
well, you're using a single large event
I
as
am.
that kind of
But it's
welcome
most
back.
notable is not also, like, if you're thinking about, well, what happens if you're not from the Lewiston Auburn area, what happens in the Lewiston Auburn area for an event, for a large gathering?
just the
Well,
balloon
I shouldn't say that, because we did have like a brew fest down in the
True.
park at
Yep.
one point, right?
Yep.
But I think it's this continuity of it occurring and reoccurring and continuing,
We had
becoming
film festivals too.
Yeah, we did.
And then there was a music festival called the Time of Rivers Festival, but that was about 10 years ago because I helped put it on.
Oh.
So I remember that. But yeah, the continuity is important. You know, it has to be something where you just know it happens every year.
Don't
and
get
the
me
only
wrong,
thing we
I
have is the
disappeared for a
balloon
while.
festival.
I
yeah.
understand that.
Children will do that.
Children will do that. Are we
As I'm
losing you
learning.
soon? Yeah.
2.5 years now. But no, I mean, again, you're using the external additional amenities as the examples. I mean,
True. True.
Forage Market and their crazy good bagels, Boba and their crazy following. I mean, you know, the fact that Boba moved to, you know, Lower Lisbon Street from outer South Main Street, his entire following is now being exposed to his new location. So they might be coming downtown just to pick up at Boba, but they're going to see, oh, there's a little bookstore in the same building. Oh, there's a bike shop. Oh, there's this plaza here. I didn't even know this was here. So I think it's a combination of all the things, like the additional amenities that you're referring to, but also just the infrastructure, the business infrastructure and the streetscaping and things of that nature. But we recognized early on, it's a very important thing that we don't have the little old ladies that live on Pond Road or Strawberry Avenue or Cotton Road, like shitting all over downtown. Because if we're going to say Carrie, if you were down in Brunswick, you're at the farmer's market and enjoying yourself.
Absolutely.
An active member of that community. And I said, Carrie, you have to come up to Lewiston. You have to open a new business up here. You're a creative guy, and I really want you to come to our downtown. And you say, you know what? I'm liking what I'm seeing. I like a lot of things. I've done a little bit of research, but let me check with a friend of mine who lives up there and get their take on it. And you go to that friend and you say, hey, you know what? You live like a mile from downtown. I'm thinking about opening my business down here. What do you think? And they're like, downtown sucks and it's full of trash.
Don't
and
do it.
Yeah, don't come here. And there's hookers and there's this and there's that and blah, 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 blah. Then you're going to be like, well, okay, I'm going to stay the hell away from that. So all the effort that we put in to getting you to give consideration to our downtown was just all thrown away by your friend who hates downtown. So we need to stop the hate, the internal hate.
No, we do. You're right. But the people who live in the Lewiston, Auburn, and greater area do need to embrace coming down here and every once in a while checking it out and not taking it at its 89 value.
Yeah.
That's really what has to happen. So building those type of connections. I brought up the Balloon Festival because it was one notable moment where you could have a lot of people from outside of the Lewiston, Auburn area coming here and seeing it. So what were we offering to pair the whole weekend or to pair that time? That's what I think. That's where I feel like sometimes we fall short. We think of the individual things. Maybe had we been doing all types of different concerted efforts, built some concerted efforts together in groupings, like uniting instead of individually moving, which is sort of how this podcast has started to come about, even to a greater degree. Thank you for coming on, by the way, Mike Dostie.
My pleasure.
That sexy enough?
Well, actually,
you know what I mean, though? It needs to be groupings.
You
It
gave
needs
a
to be a
great
lot of
example.
people.
So that's a great example. The Balloon Festival comes to town and nothing else happens.
Right.
Actually, most local people like
Outta
leave
here.
town.
Yeah.
So we have on August 21st, the main bicentennial +1 parade is coming to town. So celebrating 200 years being a state as of last year. That parade, the State of Maine parade, is
I
coming
missed
to
it.
town. Well, we all did.
I know.
We were all hunkering down, hiding from the Rona. So now it's back. It's scheduled for this year. So the city of Lewiston has come to the Downtown Association and said, we really want to capture as much of that opportunity so that the parade ends like between 12 and 1 o'clock. We don't want people to just be like, okay, parade's over, and then disperse. So the Downtown Association is coordinating the Bicentennial Street Fests, which will start just before just at the conclusion of the parade. And we're going to be looking at Lisbon Street. We're going to be looking at that last block of Lisbon Street and doing everything that we can to attract and pull people into our city so that they can see.
Walk
some of the
around a
things.
little bit, get to
So-
see it a little bit.
I don't live downtown. just hypothetically, I know there's a parade. How do I know that that's going to be going on? How are you guys getting the word out for the different events that you're going to be putting on?
The parade has got monster money behind it. Because this is the state of Maine thing. It's actually the entirety of the parade is being coordinated by the city of Auburn. And actually the only reason why there is a parade is because of the city of Auburn. So hats off to Jason Levesque over there.
Well done.
But I mean, you're talking about massive marketing campaign that is going to be launched. And it's not just going to be like, we're going to be running ads for 3.5 weeks leading up to it. There's a much more concerted effort that's going to go around it. So there's going to be like a marketing kind of spritz, and then things will go a little bit quiet, and then like another little marketing, catch your attention.
Sure. To me, I don't think you can do that type of advertising and think that you can continually do it for 5-6 weeks or however
People
long
will start
like
tuning it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's overkill. Yeah, it is.
But
So
we might do a special on that, won't we?
On
Of
what?
the podcast. On the Bicentennial
Oh, we
Street
should.
Fest.
Yeah,
Oh my
no, we
God.
should.
You should set up on top of the building and actually do the kind of announcements like, coming up, we have the State of Maine Marching Band.
Cherry.
I set up. You mean out on that one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
so
Okay.
you've
I'm
got
all
a little
for
booth,
it. I'm
little
all for
booth,
it.
And like,
We'll get 'em some
and we've
good
got,
speakers.
what do we have next?
Where
We have,
Channel 6 used to be, we could set up right there in the window and be like this.
we have the
Oh, look
Oscar
at that
Mayer
float.
Wiener Vegan.
So how come you got into the family business? To think that things can go, generationally speaking, 1, 2, 3, 4, perhaps.
I'm going to have to,
It can stop at 2. It can stop at 1.
Yeah.
And yet the family has continued. How come?
well, I'd say that the family business has always been a point of pride within the family. How I came into it was not like I feel like carrying on this legacy.
Yeah, right.
I was dropping out of college. I went to school.
That's what it was?
Yeah, no, I went to college. First year, I think I had a .79 GPA.
But you were partying a lot.
That's
what I'm thinking.
Might have been doing some other things.
Oh, really?
Other than
Like what?
Studying. The whole not studying category, most of that. So I
I
came
find that
back-
hard to believe because you're very astute
I don't know. Spend enough time
individual.
with
Is
me.
it
you'd be
because
like,
if you have an interest in it, you really go into it? Is that why? Where
I think so.
schooling wasn't necessarily what you were into?
Well, what I was into was computer science, which I very much am still, and programming, but I realized kind of after that first year, actually after the second year, because I came back from school, .79 GPA, went to USM, got the 3.5, I was making the grades, but I didn't want to sit in front of a computer all day, every day. So I said to my old man, I says, I'm making my grades now, but I'm not seeing a future in this for me. So I'm going to drop out, and I can always go back. And that's just the way it is.
Was your dad needing someone to ultimately take over?
Well,
was he thinking that way, or did you have conversations like that? Like, did he kind of write you off? He's like, this ain't happening.
No, I mean, he said to me, his response was, well, all right, you're in between your semesters. I'm coming into my busy Christmas season. So, you'll work for me. And after Christmas, you can go back to school. You can get a different job, but it'll help me out. It'll give you some real world experience. He says, I'll treat you like an employee. And I said, absolutely not. Fought it tooth and nail. The jewelry store was always a punishment. I can't tell
To work
you
there?
how many times. Oh,
Yeah.
no, it was the punishment. I did poorly on a spelling exam. I studied garnets for 2.5 weeks. And I had to take, we're talking about crystal structure. We're talking about the nuances, the locales, where it comes from. It's an education into itself. And so it was always a punishment, and I didn't want to have anything to do with it. And I just, the logic made sense. I'll get a little bit of experience. I can go back to school afterwards if I want, or I can get a different job. And so I caved, bought my first pair of slacks. We'll call them slacks.
Still have them to this day, don't you?
A little bit medium these days.
Schmedium?
Yeah, a little snug around the midriff. But no, I just kind of fell into it. and I think the subject matter is fascinating. I mean, the jewelry industry is vast. You can go to college for jewelry, and you can study it your entire life.
You can.
And
I never
still
knew
not
that.
know. Yeah. But it's also the relationships that you have with people. I mean, people are coming to you and they're saying, this was my great grandmother's diamond that, she brought over on a donkey while she was on the Mayflower, whatever it may be. I mean, there's always a story and there's that sentimental value that doesn't have a monetary value. It's like my most precious possession is this ring, which monetarily might be a $400 thing, but to you, it's millions and millions. Mm-hmm. So the relationship between the client and us is very, very different than if you were selling pants. Like, these look good.
Yeah,
these
sure.
feel good. That kind of thing. So I think that's what the appeal is for me.
Any attraction to antiques as well?
They're cool.
But not so much. No.
Well, I mean...
Well, I didn't know if because with antiques, there's almost always
too.
this attraction, this
like antique
history.
jewelry? Or
yes, antique. And
so, yes, but, the tough thing with a business, a brick and mortar business today is the competition and the nature of retail. So there are a number of things that I am very passionate about within the jewelry industry that we just can't sell. I mean, my
you
jewelry,
can't. Why?
Because the market won't bear it.
It wouldn't.
Yeah.
No.
If I said to you, so you're looking for something nice for an anniversary gift. I have some hoop earrings, and they start around $200. They're 14 karat gold. They're solid golds. They're well made, but they're manufactured. So $200, $250, right in there. That's your sweet spot. And if I said to you, all right, well, I also have these handmade earrings that are made by a Maine designer. He does this super advanced technique.
Well, that's what I would want.
And they're $2,200.
Yeah, I want that one.
Yeah, well, the question is not about wanting. The question is whether or not we're going to sell the $2,200 earrings, or if we're going to sell predominantly the $200 earrings. So your
You can't
inventory
get
is
something like that. You can't hold that type of merchandise on a consignment with any particular house.
You could, but the thing is,
It's still
when you're
not
talking about
really.
consignment and you're talking about small designer lines, you're not talking about some big corporation. You're talking about somebody that literally is like you or me. That's like, I make earrings in my shop that I made in my garage.
They have,
So
they have
it's
to
like-
make money too.
And it's a big kind of, I'm going to give you several $1,000s worth of my time, my labor, my materials, and then not know whether or not in 6 months you're going to give it all back to me and I've wasted time, or if you're going to give me money for it. Like, it's a tough ask.
Sure, yeah. You're kind of wondering with the way businesses run, especially online too.
Oh,
This individualized niche that a particular individual could create just on an Etsy or something to that effect.
Yeah, and that's a difficult.
Is
thing
competition?
too. Competition is huge. I mean, competition. If we were to go back 15 years, our biggest competition to the jewelry industry was the cruise industry. That's what people spent their disposable income on. Now it's the phone that's sitting in front of you right now, the TV that's hanging on that wall.
Yeah, right.
I mean, the competition is the cost of living that we've chosen to take on. That's now the competition. So that's a very difficult thing. I mean, and our cost of materials is increasing just like everything else. So there is no well-made, inexpensive jewelry. It's either inexpensive or it's well-made.
It can't be both.
It really can't be.
No, it can't be.
So your human relationships are, a big part of, what your business is.
Oh,
Just the history that you have with different families that have come in for generations and all of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and just the type of relationship that you have, even with a new client that comes in. I mean, Carrie, you come in and you say, "Well, I want to get a pendant for XYZ person." I said, "All right. Well, I mean, I can just show you a bunch of stuff that you'll like it, and try and convince you to buy really anything at all." Or we can have a conversation. You can tell me about the individual, like what are their likes, what are their dislikes, what do they do for work? Do you want them to wear this only on special occasions? Do you want them to wear it every day? It might require a little bit of reconnaissance, like, well, does she prefer yellow or white metals? Does she prefer big? Does she prefer more delicate and understated? Having these conversations will help us, or help me guide you into something that the recipient would most likely choose themselves or similar to. Therefore, they'll be happier with it. anything that you give when you're giving jewelry, it's always
As a gift.
as a gift.
That's very difficult, isn't it? The more information you can offer up and the more you can be thinking about the questions or what they should be taking into consideration, that's what you have to do, isn't it?
Well, we average for returns, for retail sales returns, we average less than 2 every year. And it's because...
That's impressive.
Well, it's because it's not, I mean, I would prefer to have a conversation. I would prefer for Carrie to come in, have that conversation, leave, do that research, reflect on those questions, and then come back to make a better decision. Then I sell you something out the door, and that's money in the bank, and then see you later, and then literally see you later.
Wait, returns in the sense, I think you took it a different way.
Did I?
I think
did.
so.
Oh, yeah.
Read it like, hey, this is no good.
Money
That's
back.
how I
This
took
is,
it.
you were thinking, hey, good to
Man,
see
this
you again.
necklace
Oh, no, I
sucks.
was, no. It
Oh,
was
you were
exactly.
thinking,
Really?
I was thinking
Okay.
the
Yeah,
other way.
no, like I purchased this, she hates it, I'm returning it.
Okay.
That's
I'm like, this isn't cubic zirconia. This is what I wanted.
That's funny. So you automatically had.
I had it the other way
Positive
around.
mindset.
I did have the
And I was
positive.
the
And I thought you
negative.
were thinking
Yeah.
the other way, like, nobody ever comes back. My bad.
So there's a lot that goes into it,
Well, it's a business. I mean, it's like anything else. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're selling hot dogs off of a stand. There's still a lot that goes into that. I mean, it's just different levels and
Red, brown,
Mustard,
toasted, grilled.
steamed.
onions.
Yeah.
Have you thought about doing hot dogs outside of your place?
Well, if retail continues,
No, I feel
the
like
way it is,
yeah, right.
I might
right.
be panhandling out there.
Is that pretty tough? It's got to be a pretty.
Well, like I
You're
said,
right. You're dealing. That's funny because now you're dealing with.
The entire world.
Yeah, it's not like well, what kind of special, unique gift am I going to treat myself to now? Now you're dealing with this whole electronics change in what we do, dealing with a lot of online aspects or changes to what how we shop.
Oh yeah, consumers are very different today than they were 25 years ago.
You have an online presence, I'm thinking.
Not a good one.
Not a good one.
I mean,
You
there's
have a blog spot.
There's ways. I mean, this is actually a point of contention between my father and myself about the business and doing an e-commerce website and focusing on that is, and I guess I'll give you a couple of long-winded examples,
Sure.
and perhaps it'll give a better picture.
I
But
wouldn't expect anything different.
we'll have a we'll have a stone broker from Brazil. Brazil is a huge natural resource for a variety of different gemstones. They'll come into us and they'll have literally thousands of stones that are all from different categories. But let's say we're looking at tourmaline, that if everyone's familiar, aquamarine.
I am.
So we'll spend 2.5 hours looking through these so that we can buy four stones after looking at thousands. Because those four stones meet our criteria for our standards for quality. They're also a nice value. It just hits all the marks for us. Because we put that attention into all aspects of the jewelry that we make and we sell, we don't sell inexpensive jewelry. We don't I'll take it back. We don't sell cheap jewelry because that kind of thought and process has gone into it. When you're buying online, you're either buying from reputation or price. And when the jewelry industry and the internet got married back in the 90s, it was all about price. So, I mean,
Affordability, how cheap it could be.
cheap,
Yeah, and it wasn't even about a time frame either, was it back then?
No,
That could be a month or two later. That could be a week.
Yeah. So as someone who can fabricate jewelry, I can make you 2 rings that if we took just photos of them would look almost identical, but they would have remarkably different price tags. And then when you if you physically had them and you could inspect them, you could perhaps pick up on some of the reasons why. But in taking a photo and selling it online, if I can make something that sells for $1,000 look like something that sells for $2,000, then I'm going to do that, or people will do that. And you might not see. I mean, you'll see a big price disparity.
And the consumer themselves, they don't have a second, ring to compare the quality. So to them, that's good enough, whatever they can get offline.
Well,
They can't tell the difference.
Well, you can't see it in person. You can't see how
Right.
it looks in different lights. You can't pick it up and feel its weight. You can't. There's so many things that you can't do.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
if we were going to focus on jewelry that's inexpensive, that you can sell for as little money as possible, so that it's attainable to everyone, then that's perfect for online. But if you're going to focus on something that's made better, that's going to last longer, then online's not your best avenue for selling it.
How much are you still making jewelry, creating jewelry? I knew that you were doing gems together with some precious stones. You were putting some stuff. You were creating jewelry.
Yeah.
I remember that.
I still do all the time, but
All the time.
most
Do you
of this-
enjoy that process? Is that something where you've got to get the right mindset?
You do have to get the right mindset.
Just
Absolutely.
kind of-
There's no question. I mean, excuse me. You can't just think about for you and painting, or if you were going to be you're going to focus on photography. You can't just decide. Actually, we'll use the photography example. You can't just decide I'm going to go out and I'm going to get some really dynamite photos of the falls between Lewiston and Auburn, and I'm going to do that at 10 a.m. today.
Right.
Because you get out there and the frame might not be right. The light might not be right. There might be some shithead that's sitting on the falls up there, pissing.
Yeah. Right. Right.
More likely the light's not right or something like that. So you can't just say
More
this-
likely in the dirty loo. That's right.
be on the Auburn side of the.
Son of a.
So you can't just say on demand, I'm going to go and I'm going to get the perfect results. And that extends to creativity. Even more so.
Songwriting, I'm assuming as
yeah.
well. Yeah. No, I understand. You've got to be in the right mindset for it, for sure.
Exactly.
And the environment has to support that mindset as well. I mean, you can't just rush into a room, after a crazy day, and there's a crazy room around you and everything's, wild, and say, I'm going to be creative and write a song now. You can't do it.
No.
So,
yeah, there's a number of different things. I mean,
I didn't realize. Yeah, I guess jewelry making. I didn't.
it
I
is
suppose
artistic.
when you look at particular gems or how maybe I don't know the correct terminology, so that's why I'm sort of staying away from this.
we use things like that little sticky thing.
Okay, good.
That's
Right.
that's an industry term.
Oh, is it? I just for me, it's about looking at colors. For you, it would be like words, putting words and having sounds creating together. For a jewelry maker,
Well, it's color, it's
question.
visual balance, it's complementing. I mean, it depends on the mindset, because you could have someone that has a very fluid style, and their influence and what complements their work is very different than, say, an uber modern style where everything's very geometric, very hard edges.
what do you gravitate towards
I'm
when
a
you're
fluid
creating?
guy.
You're more of a fluid.
I'm a flowy guy.
Are you?
I like it.
You like lines,
Everyone likes lines.
curves,
I like curves.
not so geometric.
Not so geometric. I have a
Yeah.
tough time with square stones
Yeah,
and
I do
rectangular
too.
stones.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I much prefer something that's got some nice curves to it.